Welcome back to 8 at 7 Prime with me, Cindy Mabi, on our special edition, engaging student representatives and leaders on finding solutions to the whole debacle around free education and what that means for quality of education, access, and also the institutional reputations of these universities. And we're joined now by Retsepo Moloi. He's the chairperson of Postgraduate Association at UJ. Fazia Hassan is from BITS SRC, and we have Yusuf Kasim from the Democratic Alliance Student Organization, and Mongi Mkhali, former SRC at the former Medunsa. Just a reaction from you, Tsepo, in how this particular audacious move by students can be taken forward if there isn't an engagement with other stakeholders, primarily the Fees Commission and the Department of Education, Higher Education.
Greetings to the viewers. Thank you for the opportunity. So, just talking to your question, nothing can happen without dialogue. So, the problem we're faced with now is there isn't any form of structure that is put in place where all the stakeholders can be engaged and they can have enough say on the issues. So, what we're seeing with force now, students reacting to the decision, is really a sign that, look, I think there wasn't a planning from government post the decision of what they will do in terms of the reaction that is going to come out. Again, management of the universities as well hasn't really put across a program where they will be able to at least call it seminars, call it symposia, call it conferences, where they can say, look, let us then put this to a debate throughout the campuses so that we can actually engage. So the other night when I was talking with the SG of South, in the solution, I was saying, look, South needs to come out stronger now, because SRCs are not just supposed to be doing this work on their own in isolation. This is the time where they need to actually claim the space in which they are the rightful owners of. But failure of them moving as fast as they should, other stakeholders are going to take this space, and then we're actually going to go into a worse scenario. And I think I'm still standing on that. Yeah,
and I mean, it could be perceived as well that students are not negotiating in good faith by now going on the protest action, as opposed to, seeing the process through. When you negotiate, there's certain concessions to be made, and there aren't necessarily timelines that can immediately satisfy your demands, and that needs to be conceded.
Yeah, I just want to say quickly, we need to condone the behavior and the reaction of the protection services, South African police services. What they're doing to students is really out of order. I don't know if they don't get enough training on crowd control, or they actually don't get instructions that they should not engage the students. Students are in a period of anxiety. Students want to react because there has been not enough and adequate dialogue between them. So what we're seeing in the visuals at VETS, what we're seeing at UCT, at UKZN, I mean, this is truly out of order, and we need to really call them out for what they're doing. And I hear earlier on you were saying that the official response from SAPS is that they did not actually engage the students. That is utter nonsense.
No, what they said, and I don't think we can necessarily dismiss it completely without any evidence, in the sense that there are criminal elements, even among students, those that are opportunistic, yes, that starts pelting stones, etc. But I don't want to focus too much on that. Right. Let's just get onto the solution in that. Are you willing to get back to the round table and have a discussion with all stakeholders, as with SRC?
The first question you actually asked, I think, needs to be dealt with, around are we negotiating in good faith, and now there seems to be a growing idea that perhaps we weren't, and we reject that. We must note that the Commission on Free Education was set to report back this year, in October of 2016, and fundamentally because we needed a way forward for 2017. And the delay of the Commission is through no fault of our students. It is through the delay of the Commission itself. Now there's a serious domino effect, because it means that come January or February, there are going to be hundreds of thousands of students who are going to be excluded from the system, financially, not necessarily academically, but definitely financially, right? That then puts a lot of pressure on us as student leaders and on the student movement to say, what are we going to do? Where is the long-term sustainable solution? And it's not there. Covering an increment, and we must quantify what it means to cover an increment. If we're saying on average tuition fees and accommodation fees are 100,000 Rand, a 6 to 8% increment is merely, it's less than 10,000 rand. And that's all
But
that's
if we're
going to be
speaking
covered.
outside at opposite ends of the spectrum, that's the whole point that we're trying to get to, is that are you willing, to, in light of everything else that you've said, to come back, cool heads, cool minds, and sit down and find a solution going forward?
I think that requires government, it requires the private sector, it requires the university and ourselves to perhaps take a step back. And that's a very difficult question for me to answer because it's not something that the student movement has really formally discussed at this point. There's a lot of anger, there's a lot of disgruntlement with the system. And I'm sure ultimately with the way student movements work, with social movements, you always find yourself in a space where you eventually negotiate. But I don't think it's fair for me to answer a yes or no at this point when students haven't mandated us to do so at the current space and time.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I just want to delve a bit deeper into the issue of the Fees Commission, because I think the media has been lazy as well in looking what are the consequences of the postponement of the Fees Commission's mandate. And I want to correct something as well. The Fees Commission was supposed to report in October. And even if the Fees Commission's recommendations were good recommendations, that it was going to bring in free education for the poor, this is what needs to be done to the budget, whatever, it wouldn't even have been in place for the 2017 academic year, because the only place you can fundamentally change the way the budgeting system works is when the budget is tabled by the finance minister. The only opportunity now is at the end of October when the adjustment budget, which can't adjust that much, it has to do so within the prescripts of the PFMA, can adjust in the interim. Now, what has happened now, and it's quite correct what my colleague is saying here from FITS, it's very correct that it wasn't the fault of students. It took President Jacob Zuma 2 to 3 months. On the 14th of January, he only appointed the commissioners. In March, the commissioners only appointed the evidence leaders. And then they come and say that they're working in good faith. They're not working in good faith. And let's say that they do come and report back in July next year. That would those recommendations would only be considered in the budget tabled in 2018 for implementation in 2019. And that is why students are angry and saying this is unacceptable.
And I mean, we sympathize with students. Again, what you need to do is to be focusing on your careers and your aspirations as opposed to fighting all these, what also seems to be a highly politicized debate on free education, by the way. How much more does politics just convolute the whole thing in your view? That we're not just dealing with straight-cut issues here, there's also the politics involved.
Yes, thanks. Even if there is politics in this issue, we need to see that even if there is politics, now this issue of free education is not because of an IFP, this one is DA, this is SASCO. This is all about all of us. It affects all the students of South Africa. We want free education. Yeah. That's what we want.
But it's clear, you know, Yusuf also said that it's fragmented. You're not necessarily singing from one voice. That's why it isn't the whole homogenous group of students that are participating. There are those that don't want to be involved, and there are those that are actually saying that, you know, you need to pay your way in life.
Yes. For those who are saying that they don't want to join the struggle for free education, they are the ones who can afford to pay the fees of the university. But now we are talking about the people who are, the students who are not affording, who cannot afford to pay the fees, because the fees of varsity, they are very expensive. Now we are saying if we want a short-term solution now, currently, I'm suggesting that why the government doesn't Blaise Zimane must come outside and say that now, in 2017, we are going to introduce free education for the poor, and then the 2018, we are going to deal with the richer students.
Yeah, but you're not talking about free education on merit, though. And there's something fundamentally misleading. If you say free education to somebody who may not qualify to meet the requirements or criteria of the university. Secondly, someone who academically doesn't have the propensity to succeed. So if you say free education, I think it's also misleading. Maybe you can clarify that for us. Thanks. Yeah.
So I could just
I'm saying the free education element of it. There's certain things to consider. The university has got its criteria, policies, and if you say everybody and anybody qualifies necessarily, isn't that misleading?
Well, I don't think we're necessarily saying that it should be, yeah, if you qualify, then you should study. It's not that we're saying that the qualification should change. If you qualify to study at a university, then you should be able to study for free if you're academically deserving but can't financially afford it. But I also, I mean, in terms of redressing the past, I think that we also need to engage on who is necessarily academically deserving, because I think that, for example, a child coming from middle-class families studying at a middle-class school, receiving better marks, is not necessarily more deserving than a student who came from Mamelodi, for example, went to a rural school, walked 30 Ks every day, and maybe didn't get the 80s or 90s. So I think in terms of also acceptance of students into institutions of higher learning, we need to engage with that.
But don't you think that will also erode the quality, because there are certain standards and benchmarks, qualifications that you need to possess before you can study for a particular course or degree?
I feel that we need to, as institutions, create support structures for our students. I feel like if I look at University of Pretoria, for example, it's predominantly black students that drop out in first year. We need to say, okay, fine, this is an issue. How do we create the support structures for those students?
Okay. So going forward, before the end of the year or final exams, what are the students saying? Are we looking at more imminent protests? Are we looking for more disruptions? Or are we looking at least considering the idea of sitting down with all stakeholders? Benedict.
Okay, thanks, Cindy. Maybe firstly to clear the space. Those are just petty politics. Yes, it includes politics and all those things, but the education part of it, it's a societal issue. We can't have two parties of people doing different things, but in the same cabinet. I mean, why should always be the fact that when things are going wrong, there should be commissions of inquiries that are being set up? You are just simply wasting our time. Tell us that you are going to give us what we want as learners, so we stop doing all these things that are happening. And I mean, we cannot keep on playing a blaming game. Whether it's the ANC that has misused the money, whether it's DA, whether it's EFF or whatever. What we need to have as students, and this is our call as students, so there shouldn't be any politics that are played. It should be just plain on a black and white paper that now fine, students, you want free education, we are going to give you free education. And when we're saying free education, we are saying that it should be those ones who are deserving, which is, they are your poor people. I mean, if my father is a manager at APSA or any big company, I don't have to get NSFAS, I don't have to get a bursary. My parents should be able to pay for me, so that we are able to come with solutions that how do we dissolve these other bursaries that are there and they are not useful to one instrumental structure that are going to fund all these ones who are poor.
How sustainable is that, especially with the next cohort of students who would have to be financed for free by government, and so the cycle goes, as opposed to the graduates then paying back the money? Again, there's virtue in having to earn your keep in life. That's just how it is. So how is this going to be sustained if everybody goes through higher education for free?
Look, firstly, let's dissolve all these bursaries that are in higher institutions. We take them, we place them into NSFAS account. Simple. And then that's how we are going to sustain it. I mean, you have your FNB, which keeps on building stadiums, keeps on building malls and all these things. Why are you not taking that money and taking it to education? You have your vice chancellors, which are bonusing more than 500,000 each and every year. Why are you not taking those bonuses to free education?
Now you're saying let's just take back everything that we've invested in the World Cup, the fact that we had to go and submit twice to the world and enjoy all these euphoric moments. We must take all of that back, demolish FNB Stadium as if it never existed. But I get your point. Let's just get a reaction from our panelists this side.
No, I think one major question that I feel strongly on responding on, the fact that students are viewed as not willing to come into the discussion table. I think we're a wrong message. And as I have mentioned before, that students have went to present to the highest office in the country, where the union buildings we tabled from the call for free education with all the three principles that, with the three pillars that fall under the principle. The issue of the issue of transformation, because the sense we are getting is that we are deliberately made to run in circles. When you are saying as a government you are not taking full responsibility on what must happen with fees, you are saying we must go back again and consult with university councils. It's taking us back step, because we have said that the government must take responsibility and ensure that we no longer have institutional autonomy. But more than that, with many solutions, that structures that represent students have tabled even before the minister could announce on the 8% 8% maximum. It is incorrect that students are not willing to be engaged. We have been engaged. We have SAUS that has went into all universities and communicated with their respective leadership, and all those people have have submitted that these are the recommendations that we have in place, and SAUS has been in endless meetings with the commission that was led
So
by
you've
the
reached your threshold in terms of whether you're going to engage further, and what needs to happen now?
Look, we have reached the threshold, and if government shows still continue with signs that they are not willing to listen to us, I think as a student movement that is objective, the pragmatic approach is that we must just double the effort.
Yeah, you think that's a plausible, or rather better solution to what we currently have?
Look, Cindy, what do we really need to, let's ask the question, what do we really need to be engaging on now? I think students across the country have made their voices clear. They have been engaged in engagements before, a number of times. What really needs to happen now is some good faith needs to be shown. And the way that can be shown is if there is a firm commitment on two things in particular. The first is that in the adjustment budget that is going to come before Parliament at the end of October, that every single unfunded student, as we stand right now, there are unfunded students across the universities. Some universities there's 6,000, some there's 5,000, some there's 7,000. Some of them came through the registration exemption at the beginning of the year, and they've been set up to fail. That every single unfunded student, the money will be made available in the adjustment budget to make sure that those unfunded students are fully funded, and as an interim measure. And then at the next budget that's going to be tabled next year, that the necessary reprioritization is going to take place. And all it needs is political will. It's not that the money is not available, but the necessary reprioritization is going to take place in the next budget for free higher education for the poor, at least, with support for the missing middle, to be instituted. If that good faith is shown and that commitment is made, rather than just referring it to a fees commission that we know their recommendations will become irrelevant because of the timelines involved, the earliest that it could be implemented is in the 2019 academic year.
Sorry, Yusuf.
There will be good faith that is shown.
Yeah, support. I mean, obviously, students frustrated, and understandably so, and wanting things to move or to be expedited. But we know you can influence policy, but it's ultimately up to the legislature, or rather the lawmakers, to then redirect the monies, as Yusuf was saying. Is this something that we can anticipate in the near future?
Okay, so firstly, I agree with what he just said. I think it's very important that political will actually is prioritized here. So we can come up with all these brilliant ideas and all these plans of how, we should go forward. But if the people who are supposed to implement this, tabulate this in the right platforms, are not willing to do so, we will find ourselves in the same position and basically going worse. And, but I just want to talk to, fair enough, we're looking for a way forward now. Right? I don't think anyone is disputing this. Firstly, I think what we are seeing now is we're actually seeing a nation which is confused by what the 8% fee hike increase means. A lot of people are actually debating it in a very, very wrong manner. And we're seeing a lot of confusion in the process. The first thing that I would suggest is I think we need, for solidarity amongst the leadership, government SAUS, to actually explain what the fee hike 8% maximum means. Because I think there's a lot of ambiguity and people don't actually understand. The universities are relieved. At least now they got a budget that they can work on, that at least can relieve them from the 0% that was last year. But the rest of the people, though, in the communities, do not understand what's going on. And therefore, I think there's some serious level of arrogance that's taking place and leaving a lot of people behind. So that will be my first. The second, though, is he's talking about bursaries being shifted towards NFSAS. So you've got to understand that, NFSAS and bursaries are two different things. Okay, there's a distinction here. And bursaries come with their own conditions from different stakeholders, while NFSAS is strictly government, right? So that is not really taking us anywhere. But I think in the spirit of going forward, first of all, political tensions, political differences, political shenanigans, we have to accept. We're a country of democracy. There will be interests. We can't shy away from this. But in the spirit of having a common goal that we do ultimately want to achieve free education, then we need to obviously forcefully work together. We need to find each other on this. It's not going to be easy, no one is saying this, but we need all the role players to actually at least turn the page and be on the same spirit.
Yeah, part of the solution, or at least the perspective that I was hoping would come out, is that it's wonderful to have free education and a highly qualified population that is sitting with unemployment. We know that there are graduates currently that are unemployed. So how then do you ensure that there's a market for these high skills that will be produced from the institutions?
This is, of course, why we're saying that there's a need for a structural change in the general society. And our universities are the way they are because that's how South Africa is. So, of course, like you've alluded, that there is going to be serious policy changes that need to take place. Because looking at in other countries that have implemented free education, have created spaces to make sure that the young youth was able to get into forms of employment, which we're also discussing that perhaps we do not necessarily need to have everyone entering universities, but we could go on skill search and open our nursing colleges, teaching colleges, and so forth, to make sure that we create a space where we train our people and put them into a system. So there's a greater structural change, and I'm glad it has come out from the panel that we're going to need serious political will. This conversation is 10 years more old of free and quality education. We're here now and we can't turn back. So we're going to need some serious political will. We're going to need some serious changes and some revamping of the system, some serious transformation into the system. Because if we're going to transform universities, we have to transform the economy. And if anyone can do that, is the government that must be able to create spaces or an economy that's conducible, that is going to be able to absorb the young graduates into. Some people graduate and they don't get jobs. This is serious offense to people that went to university. This is why it's serious that the government creates that space.
Yeah, maybe we're looking at the pockets of excellence, and I'm not by any means trying to undermine the other public universities, but we know that there is a level, albeit a real perception, that your key areas of excellence, your roads, UCT, VETS, etc., is where everybody wants to go to, because we still have the notion that public universities are inferior, and therefore your qualification won't get you very far in life. Is that part of the reason why we're seeing these protests?
Yes.
No, I meant, former Bantustan.
The discussion here is the dichotomy between historically so-called white and historically black universities. And not only the dichotomy that's been created by the current so-called solution by the minister. It's very divisive. It seeks to set up your historically advantaged versus historically disadvantaged institutions against each other. But we must acknowledge that there are fundamentally incorrect situations there. It cannot be that TUT has been protesting for free education for the last 20 years, and that the moment WITS, UCT, Stellenbosch picks up on it, that all of a sudden it's an issue. Those are things that we need to defeat. But we also need to understand that we've not been investing in our historically disadvantaged institutions as much as we should be. There's a reason why WITS, UCT, roads, for some reason, are considered the highest. It's because that there's been more investment, but they also, during apartheid times, were pushed to the front. And those are things that we're going to take very, very long for us to overcome, but it speaks to that structural solution.
All right, so we're going to have to leave it there for now, and just give you a chronicle update of what happened in the events leading up from Tuesday and culminating in violent clashes with police and students. And this is all in the fees must fall debate. Do stay with ANN7, and we'll leave you with these images.
University students are not giving up on their demands for free education anytime soon. While protests died down at Wits, sporadic violence at UKZN forced authorities to shut down the Pietermaritzburg campus. Authorities said the move was to allow law enforcement officers to arrest the instigators of violence.
We needed to shut down the campus for today, the Pietermaritzburg campus, so that the police and security are able to arrest the identified individuals tonight. The past couple of weeks, we have lost over 160 million in damages.
Wow.
And that is just too much for us to lose. Firstly, we do not understand what is the issue, because the minister has very clearly said that the universities themselves are allowed to increase their fees with up to 8% and not more than that.
Wits students held a mass meeting on campus to discuss a way forward for the protest. More students from other tertiary institutions in the area also joined in.
What we're saying is, okay, we're not being a threat to the public. We're not trying to demolish anything. We're not trying to hurt anyone or hurt society in general. But the police are coming in our territory, and then students feel the need to defend themselves by throwing rocks. And the government has to realize that the majority of students, it's not just the minority thing, the majority of students who come from an underprivileged black background cannot afford to be in this institution. We can't afford to learn. And the society where you need to be learned to get a job or get anywhere in order to make money.
Meanwhile, UCT students chose not to take part in a picket organized by Vice-Chancellor Max Price. They said it didn't make sense to heed Price's call while the institution excluded those who could not pay.
Max Price said students should come and join this picket. It doesn't make sense to be marching alongside vice-chancellors who, as we're speaking right now, are busy interdicting students, are busy expelling students. It is to show and highlight the hypocrisy of academics who are silent when these things are happening, are silent when people are being expelled, interdicted, but are willing to then come and call for our solidarity when it is convenient for them. So that's the plan really going forward, is to consolidate our base as a student movement, and as we've seen right now, to articulate our position clearly and say, here is where we're drawing the line.
With protests erupting in one university after the other, students' chants for free education in their lifetime are getting louder and louder. Bureau Report, ANN 7.
And that's our special edition of the Fees Must Fall debate, of which we'll have many more until some headway has been made. And thank you so much to the student leadership and representatives joining us today on ANN 7. And we did get a commitment from you, so if you'll give me a thumbs up that the media or our reporters will not be accosted, or they will not, are they safe when they come to your premises?
Our students will decide.
Okay, because the media is also on your side. But thanks so much for watching ANN 7 Prime. We'll take a quick ad break. We'll see you shortly.